we have a very distinguished panel with some real distinguished panelists to talk about a very critical, actually, issue of the day, the future of religious freedom and democracy in Taiwan. As we all know, the Jewish tradition to call for assembly for a serious issue, I would invite Rabbi Bobby to blow the shofar to start with today's session. Rabbi Bobby?
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yeah. You really give us the energy, right, for victory, for freedom. The world has witnessed the brutal invasion by the Russian regime to the Ukrainians. While we are paying the attention on the atrocities, the war in Ukraine, we should not forget, before Putin actually started the invasion, where he got his launching order. It was in Beijing. It was after a meeting with his buddy, President and dictator Xi Jinping. And we could not forget what Xi Jinping's aim or next target, or maybe he has already been planning. That is the country of Taiwan. So it's very appropriate at this moment, at this IRF Summit time, we should discuss about what's the stake when Xi Jinping to make his decision to invade Taiwan. As the Foreign Minister of Taiwan, Joseph Wu, recently has eluded that China and President Xi Jinping is preparing. It's not a whether or if, it's just a when. What does that imply for religious freedom and democracy in Taiwan, in Asia, and the world? And not only for this democracy, religious freedom issue, what does that imply to the global trade and economy? And what the US and the Western allies have already prepared or are preparing. So these are very serious topics we're going to discuss today with our distinguished panelists. Our first speaker, Dr. Sen-Hong Yang, he's the president and founder of Taiwan Association for China Human Rights, a very close friend of mine, and of course, over the years, strong voice, perhaps sometimes called a lone voice, for call the world and call the Taiwanese people to focus on the China's human rights and religious freedom. And Dr. Yang is also a public health expert, a TV commentator, a radio host at Radio Taiwan International. Our second speaker is Pastor Che-Yan. He is the director of Research and Development Center of General Assembly of Presbyterian Church in Taiwan, which is the organizer, host of today's event, and ChinaAid is honored as the co-host. And Pastor Huang, especially since 2011, has been personally involved in helping the victims of religious persecution from mainland China. Of course, has an loud speaker for advancing religious freedom in Asia. And our third speaker, our distinguished guest, is Nadine Maenza, who is also a close friend, who just finished her term as the chairwoman of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. And congratulations, my friend, as the newly elected president of IRF Secretariat. So we're looking forward to working together. And by the way, Nadine had visited Taiwan, and that really, I think we count on your role in leading the defense. And now let's welcome Dr. Sen-Hong Yang first.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much. And special thanks to Bobby. It's so inspiring and blessing from God, I believe. Yeah, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for me have the chance to speak for Taiwan here. And I want to explain why Taiwan matters to the world. Freedom is not free. Everybody knows. Peace is also so expensive. And dignity is not cheap. Health is so not easy to earn. We all experience that. Most of the people share the same feelings now globally, including Taiwan. In the past 2 years, the people of the world have faced pandemic, war, and refugees and deaths. The famine is the crisis ahead. Invasion of Ukraine is still a great problem, especially when China is evilly helping Russia to so obviously, China has expressed the double the ambitions to invade Taiwan stronger than ever. This alarming message draws the attention of global democratic country to Taiwan. The cover page of the magazine Economist last year has already highlighted this crisis, the most dangerous place on earth. The heart of the problem is why does China want to invade Taiwan? Most international media and experts have continually ignored a key factor. China wants to see the Taiwan Strait, the most important shipping route in the world. The route accounts for more than 50% of the world high technology GDP. More than 1,000 oil tankers, chemical tankers, container ships, and aircrafts travel through it every day. The Taiwan Strait is the major bloodline of the global democratic countries and a vital pathway for the United States economy. Under the clock of invading Taiwan, the Chinese Communist Party's true goal is to cut off war-free trade. Annually, I give you another statistics from Taiwan National Security Council. 1.7 million aircrafts passing through the ADIG of Taiwan. And in the seas surrounding Taiwan, there are also 0.55 million ships navigating along the island seashore. So Taiwan Strait has become a globalized common asset for navigation, safeguarding the transportation security of the world, and Taiwan must become a permanent, democratic, and free base for the sustainable development of the world's GDP. This issue have not been given much attention by the Western world for a long time. Once the Chinese Communist Party seizes Taiwan, they will turn Taiwan into a military base that threatens the safety of everyone else. The Chinese Communist Party's strategy against Taiwan, we noted, is to keep the island, but not the people. Seizing it is the first step of CCP's plan to dominate the war. They will start by deploying nuclear weapons in Taiwan Island and to target neighboring countries and United States. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is also of significant importance to Taiwan. Putin's success would cause the United States to provide endless military support for its NATO allies, leaving no resources to protect the safety of Taiwan Strait, the East China Sea, and the South China Sea. At that time, China will have an opportunity to invade Taiwan by force. They will not only attack Taiwan, but also Japan, the Philippines, and other Southeast Asia countries, even Australia and New Zealand. Shinzo Abe, the former Prime Minister of Japan, is the first one that realized this threat. He said, any emergency over Taiwan would mean an emergency for Japan as well. He even suggested the US to deploy nuclear weapons to Japan to protect the whole region. If Taiwan is safe, Japan is safe. The entire world is safe. Now things are changing. A new initiative for more effective and efficient cooperation in support of the Pacific Island priorities. White countries, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, the UK, and the United States launch an inclusive informal mechanism, the Partners in the Blue Pacific, PBP. It is a good beginning. Last week, G7 leaders relaunched the newly renamed Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, pledging to raise $600 billion in private and public funds over 5 years to finance the needed infrastructure in developing countries and to counter China's Belt and Road project. It is also good news. We will invite Shinzo Abe to come to Taiwan in the near future after Taiwan lifts the restrictions for COVID-19. We also hope to hold an International Religious Freedom Summit in Taipei next year, 2023. Before that, Taiwan has many things to prepare. Most importantly, if the Congress of the United States will want to amend the Taiwan Relationship Act to strengthen the support for Taiwan, simultaneously, we hope it must include the recognition of Taiwan's sovereignty. Japanese Congress is also considering a Taiwan Relations Act after this July election. We have just learned recently, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told the House of Commons that his government's long-standing position was to ensure Taiwan's voice will be heard in multilateral forums. In this case, we urge the Canadian Congress to legislate Taiwan Relations Act in the future. If all of the democratic allies can do the same thing, just like the United States Taiwan Relations Act, a commitment to protect the bloodline of world economy, Taiwan Strait and Taiwan. Thus, the global strategy for democratic allies must be changed more quickly, not only to recognize Taiwan as a sovereignty and an independent country, but also to make sure that Taiwan will be an inseparable part of democratic territory. There is no space for any kind of political ambiguity, because losing Taiwan means surrendering the front line of global democracy. And we hope the one China principle must be re-examined now. The clock is ticking. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Yang.
I will talk from the experience of Presbyterian Church in Taiwan. What can Taiwan do for religion freedom? Yonghe Community College in New Taipei City held a course on June 11 titled A Historical Tour of Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall, which featured a speech by National Taiwan University Associate Professor in Sociology, Huang Ke-Xian, on the topic of the authoritarian shadows of the cross, how the party run, nation monitors and infiltrates the Presbyterian Church. Huang had been commissioned by the Executive Yuan's Transitional Justice Commission, TJC, to study the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan, as presented in files handed over by national security agencies. According to Huang, the files he reviewed were from between 1965 and 1998. If organized into one pie, they were stacked up to approximately 2 meters tall. However, those files did not include information on several key instances, such as the Declaration of Human Rights in 1977, events before and after the Formosa incident, and the arrest of Reverend Gao Junmin. The existence of those files provides the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan underwent a period of religion persecution. Its members include, in 1974, the Kuomintang KMT regime, seizing copies of the Bible writing in attire, or Romanized Taiwanese under the guise of the national language policy violations. After the Formosan incident in 1979, when Minister Xu Tianxian was arrested on the podium during his December 23 Christmas service by special agents and hoarded away in a person van before his followers' eyes. The degree of KMT surveillance of the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan during its authoritarian periods is some ways equivalent of the Chinese Communist Party's CCP surveillance now of Chinese Christianity. During the authoritarian period, the KMT regime did not only monitor the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan, it monitored religion as a whole, which also includes other Christian denominations, Buddhism, Catholicism, and other local beliefs. However, due to historical reasons, the KMT region was especially severe in its surveillance of the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan. This was because other Christian denominations and most Catholic churches had come to Taiwan along with KMT after it lost the Civil War in 1949. It means the Christianity's development in Taiwan was unique. The surveillance, repression of freedom of speech, and arrest of ministers and followers that Presbyterian Church in Taiwan went through helped it establish a discourse in preaching. It was to strive for the coming of the Lord, or the kingdom of God is not a matter of eating and drinking, but of righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. Righteousness and peace thus become goals on which the church put emphasis and pursued, leading it to have a direct concern for the development of Taiwan's democracy and freedom, as well as anti-authoritarianism. As the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan pursues democracy and freedom, it is also forced to face the threats coming from the People's Republic of China, PRC. This was highlighted when it came into direct contact with the China Christian Council, CCC, during the 1992 World Council of Churches, WCC event, when it expanded the scope of the church's concern beyond Taiwan and make it a fight against China's suppression within the international community. Having gone through persecution and resistance, the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan understands deeply that democracy, freedom, and human rights are effective situations in the fight against dictatorship. Therefore, when the CCP began to persecute Christianity, joined other groups and held a press conference voicing support for oppressed Christians. Since 2018, the church has also actively taken a Christian who fear China due to oppression from the CCP. In a very real sense, Taiwan became a city of refuge, as they waited to travel to the third country. The Presbyterian Church in Taiwan became their guarantor in Taiwan, helping them with basic living needs, their children's education, and medical assistance, allowing them to be cared for after leaving China for another country. The church has also learned from its experience and hope to forge a trusting partnership with the government as well as domestic and international organizations. This was why during the series of the persecutions following the Umbrella Revolution in Hong Kong, the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan was able to provide immediate help and take activists who fled Hong Kong. I believe the Presbyterian Church in Taiwan's experience of being oppressed makes it an active, steadfast supporter and defender of religious freedom. It also makes itself a city of refuge that accepts the persecuted, putting righteousness and peace into practice. Of course, from past experience, we know the church was not crushed by pursuit from the KMT regions thanks to support from its relations with the WCC. So it will also continue to work with other like-minded organizations to support the religion freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to ask our third distinguished speaker, our friend Nadine, for forgiveness. I'm sure we're honored to have our co-chair of the IRF Summit, Dr. Katrina Lantos Swett, to join us, offering some remarks. And Katrina has traveled to Taiwan with our we have a power table of women, right, to support Taiwan, undefeatable. And Dr. Katrina Lantos also served as the president of the Lantos Foundation for Human Rights and Justice. So let's welcome Katrina, Dr. Lantos.
It is such a pleasure for me to be here with you. I need to begin by paying tribute to Bob Fu, who is one of the most fearless warriors on behalf of democracy and freedom, and the many, many millions of people, tens and hundreds of millions of people in China who suffer under that brutal dictatorship. And I also want to acknowledge Nadine Maenza, who was my sort of succeeded after I had left USERF. She joined USERF, served brilliantly as chair. I mean, I think she's viewed as one of the most serious and substantive and kind of get-it-done chairs that USERF ever had. And really, your name is sort of a legend out there, Nadine. So it's quite an honor to be here with you. I am not going to mince my words today, and I'm really only going to talk parenthetically, if you'll forgive me, about religious freedom. I want to talk about the precursor to religious freedom, which is the necessity for a democratic and a free society. Now, we know that Taiwan is in peril, and I don't think we should kid ourselves about it. I don't think we can afford to engage in happy talk or crossed fingers or hopeful thinking or wishing upon a star. We must look with clear-eyed sobriety at the risks that are posed to the independence and the religious freedom and the democratic practices and the rule of law that currently prevail in Taiwan, but would be crushed, as we know, if it were to be taken over by China. It's just a fact. All those optimists who some now 20 plus years ago, when the treaty was signed, granting China sovereignty over Hong Kong, in which Great Britain relinquished their sovereignty over Hong Kong. Many promises were made. Many hopes were expressed. And yet, if you look at what has happened to Hong Kong today, that once vibrant outpost of democracy, of pluralism, of religious freedom, of economic vitality, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, it has been crushed. It has absolutely been crushed. And if there is one lesson we need to take from what happened to Hong Kong, it is that it is much harder to roll back this kind of repression than to stop it in the first place. We do not want to be fighting a rearguard action on the back end when it comes to Taiwan, because I hate to say it, but I'm not sure we have the political will to fight those rear guard actions once the war has started, once the occupation has started, once the national security law has been passed, once the democracy movement has been crushed. Now, obviously, all of this has been underscored and made much more dramatic by events in Ukraine. And Ukraine is obviously a terrible situation. It's an outrageous situation, an unprovoked war against a sovereign country. But Ukraine has been a very clarifying moment in some ways for the world. And I hope that it has been and will even more so be a clarifying moment for China. So it has sort of ripped the mask off of China's efforts to portray itself as kind of neither here nor there, and its constant doublespeak in which it attempts to suggest that it is a legitimate part of kind of the community of nations. But with their decision to back Russia in this unprovoked war against Ukraine, they have clearly helped divide the world again, if you will, into the free world and those who support dictatorship and oppression. I think China is taking very careful note of what happens in Ukraine. They are taking careful note of the pretty serious, but I hope soon to be even more serious, sanctions and economic isolation that has been imposed on Russia. Now, dozens of major Western corporations have left or are in the process of leaving Russia. Obviously, we have a range of sanctions. We still have not fully implemented truly effective sanctions on the sale of Russian oil, but I hope that that will be coming. China, I think, is noting with great care the dramatic infusion of the most sophisticated weaponry into Ukraine, and the recent commitment by the G7 countries that they are in this till the end with Ukraine. I think China has also noted what surprised a lot of people, and that was the Ukrainians were ready to fight. They were ready to fight for their freedom and to fight for their independence and to fight for their country. Often we can avoid fighting in this world if we know ahead of time what we're ready to fight for. And I believe that the people of Taiwan would be ready to fight for what they have built, a prosperous, democratic, pluralistic, rights-respecting rule of law society. And they are not, as the Russians thought would be the case with Ukraine, basically few days, roll in, decapitate the government, turn it into a vassal state, all done. There'll be a little bit of high-minded, hot rhetoric about how this shall not stand, but it would stand, and the world would move on. So Ukraine has scrambled the narrative, and I think it has scrambled the narrative in a way that I believe is very, very important to the future of Taiwan. But what must happen now, and of course this all does tie back to religious freedom, so forgive me for giving what sounds like a much more political set of remarks, but I think it is intimately connected. Because you look to China, there is no freedom of religion, conscience, and belief in China. None at all. It is absolutely crushed. From the Uyghurs to the Tibetans to the house church movement to all of the Christian world in China, to the Falun Gong, you name it. Any community that places their faith above their fealty, if you will, to the state is a threat to the Chinese Communist government. They know that. And so if Taiwan is not defended, religious freedom will also be crushed there. So these are intimately connected. I would encourage all of you in whatever way you can, in whatever opportunities you have, to raise your voices, to begin a drumbeat of lobbying and pressure on all of our leaders in Washington to say that Ukraine is a warning, and we must heed the warning. Shame on us if we don't. There will be no excuse if we do not make it abundantly clear before something happens to China that the consequences will be disastrous and unimaginable, and that everything that China has sought to build now over the last, more than half century will be at risk, that there will be an economic isolation and a cutting off of China's ability to interact with the rest of the world. These are harsh words, and I know China is a proud country and a belligerent government that doesn't like being confronted. But that is what is required. China is also a bully. It is a bully in its region of the world, and bullies need somebody to stand up to them. And usually, when somebody with a little heft of their own stands up to the bully thinks twice, and the bully says, well, maybe this isn't in our interest. Maybe that aspiration we have to crush and occupy and take advantage of all of the wealth and achievements of Taiwan, maybe it's not worth the price we'd have to pay. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to a very cold-hearted calculation with these kinds of regimes. Is the price too high? If the price is too high, they will back down. If the price isn't high enough, they'll take a chance and try to expand their reach and their oppressive rule. So I'm very delighted because my youngest daughter just arrived to spend the last little bit of the summit with me, but she's also sort of my minder now, and she's pointing to her watch because I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave you. Thank you for the opportunity, Bob, to join you. I do apologize in a way for the sternness of my message today, but I feel it very strongly. I love Taiwan. I had the opportunity to be there with these wonderful gentlemen. I saw the spirit of the people of Taiwan, and we owe it to our honor, and we owe it to our friends, and we owe it to the world. We owe it to our commitment to religious freedom and democracy and human rights to stand by Taiwan, to strengthen Taiwan, and to send an unambiguous message to China. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. We'll make sure Xi Jinping heard your speech.
I hope he did. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Nadine?
Well, that's a tough act to follow. She's about the most inspirational speaker you're going to get, and was very generous. And also, Bob, that was very generous. And my family, my daughter had coined a term that he was Special Forces for Religious Freedom. My family, when they think of Bob Fu, that's what they say. And so it's an honor to be here with all of you. And of course, following Dr. Yang and Pastor Hung is tough too, because you guys, you know what's at stake, and it hits you really hard. And so I'm sitting next to you, listening to that and feeling that pain of not getting the attention that people are treating it like a normal thing. And so I'm actually here a little bit to talk about how prisoners of conscience can be, and I know that Bob uses this so well, can be both a gift to the movement, but also our advocacy for them can help them too. So it goes both ways. And I know that Ming Chi was supposed to be here, and I saw that your announcement that even though he had gotten a visa, the U.S. turned him away because he didn't have the right vaccine in prison. And so he was supposed to be here today, and I was going to talk a little bit about the advocacy for him. And so in February 2019, when I was a commissioner, and as you just heard, I just left the commission, so I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission today. But I had a chance to meet with his wife, Li Ching Yu, yes, and along with Anarima Bargava and some of the professional staff. And I remember it being a very emotional meeting. I know you sent me a picture of us hugging. And as most of you know, Li Mingqing is a Taiwanese human rights advocate who was a prisoner of conscience. In March of 2017, he disappeared after traveling to China's Guangdong province from Baku to visit friends. 10 days later, it was confirmed that he was being held by the Chinese authorities. A spokesperson for the Chinese government said he was, quote, under investigation by the relevant authorities on suspicion of activities harmful to national security, and he ended up being sentenced to 5 years in prison on conviction of subverting state power. And of course, we all know he was an activist, so he committed no crimes other than advocating for a democracy, which we know is a crime in China. He was finally released in April of 2022, so this was obviously very joyous. He spoke recently about his time in prison, and he said that they demanded that he would confess to being a spy, but he refused to do so. They told him he'd get out sooner if he did, because that they were going to swap spies. But he said that his quote is so beautiful: "Subversion is a personal act, while spying implicates the whole Taiwanese government, and I cannot betray my country." And so he was sent to Che-Yan prison in Hunan province. Initially, he worked 11 to 12 hours daily, year-round, except for a 4-day Lunar New Year break. He said food smelled rotten when it cooled, and he initially was without hot water in the Hunan's bitter winters. He also shared that Xishan prison, saying it was a total slavery sweatshop. The prison produced gloves, shoes, bags, and backpacks. His treatment, though, changed. And why did it change? Because advocacy began on his behalf. And we have seen this over and over again. And I know with the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, prisoners of conscience is such an important part of what we do. And I know it is with you too, Bob, and it touches me so much. And this is why it's so important, because it puts a human face to the suffering. Religious freedom violations can sound so like white collar, but then when you start talking about the suffering and what that means, and prisoners are oftentimes the ones that pay the biggest price. And I know that prisoners of conscience I've advocated for, they're so close to my heart. I have a hard time talking about them, actually. And so, I think that, what we've often heard is, that we're careful to only advocate for ones that can be advocated for. So it's safe to advocate for a prisoner of conscience that Bob or that Yusuf is talking about, because we know that it's the families alongside. I mean, there are people we advocate for, and there's someone I even negotiated a release of that never went public because there's some situations, as you know, that can't be talked about. But I think, it's really important because stories break through the barrage of information, and right now everyone has an information overload, but yet that story will grab you and helps people to understand. And so, as Katrina was so eloquently explaining, we need to tell the story. You just don't presume that members of Congress get it. And members of Congress they talk about information overload. It's like drinking water from a fire hose with their staffs. And so, if you go to the House side, most of the staffers, they switch every 6 months. As soon as they get to know an issue, they're gone. So what I would say is your members of Congress, they really care about their own constituents. So meet with them in Washington, meet with them in the district office, get communities to meet with them, and tell stories. Don't just give them facts, because it just isn't as effective. The combination of the two is really the most helpful. The other thing I wanted to mention was this administration cares a lot about Congress. The past two administrations didn't like Congress so much, but this one, a lot of the successes I've had have been private letters from members of Congress to the president, things like that. It's been really interesting how powerful that is. So, having a member of Congress go speak to Blinken, having a member of Congress speak to the National Security Advisor, but most of all, don't presume that people in Congress are educated on this. That what we just heard today, the Taiwanese, if they heard about the Strait, that would be a brand new piece of information for most members of Congress. So that's a powerful piece of information. The economy, what would happen to the world economy if this happens. Yeah. Those are the kind of things. So I just want to encourage you that, we have the information here. I know you guys are already brilliant strategists and advocates, but it takes an army of people to really kind of move the needle on something this big. But the stakes are so high that it's really important that we do it. And I know the whole IRF committee would come alongside. So just wanted to encourage you to keep doing the advocacy. And I know we have families here, and my heart just breaks for those of you that have loved ones that are still being held. And just know you're in our thoughts and prayers, and we'll continue to advocate for them too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadine. Thank you, Nadine. She is not only an author, speaker, but she's a doer. I mean, I remember we exchanged countless text messages. Even when she was the commission chair, she was visiting Bangladesh to investigate the Rohingya crisis over there. And then that was the time I got a case, Xinjiang, a girl from Xinjiang. She escaped after her father was thrown into a concentration camp, and she basically hurriedly got out to Bangladesh and then was taken advantage of and being raped and basically almost lost her life. She kind of contacted me and she said, "Oh, Pastor Fu, I'm an atheist." She disclosed her as atheist. Could you also help me? She was dying, and it was Nadine. Went there, traveled there, and basically gave her cash from her own pocket to survive her. And she's, I think, recognized by the UN now as a refugee now in Thailand. So we have a very, maybe 5 minutes left, but I want to be also very blunt, ask some straightforward question. One question to Nadine now. Okay. Is, as Katrina just mentioned, dictator Xi Jinping is seriously preparing for war. Are we ready or willing to defend Taiwan?
That is a scary question, and I obviously can't speak for the Biden administration. We need to build the political will. We need pressure. We need cover, because a lot of times what happens is members of Congress couldn't give some cover to a president, like if he doesn't want to look like he's too aggressive, or he doesn't want to get into a foreign war or whatever. But if he's hearing from enough members of Congress they want him to do something, then that's going to give him some political cover where he's going to feel like, I have more of my party supporting than I would have expected. And those are the kind of things that help bring that will to an administration to do the kind of things they need to do. So hearing from, important constituencies. I mean, you saw this with Trump, right? The Christian pastors would come with him with things, and because he knew that was an important constituency, he would move towards it. Biden's no different. So what constituencies are important to him? Have them go to him and say, this one matters. You need to be tougher right up front, and get some really good people putting the strategy. But so I don't know if the will's there, but there's a way we can build it. And we need to work together and think about how we can do that.
Mm. Thank you. We certainly, all of us, right, need to be prepared to help. And my second question to both of you, Dr. Yang and Pastor Huang, we have already been seeing what's happening in Ukraine and how residual and vital the Ukraine, the people, the citizens are defending their own country. Is our Taiwanese people ready, prepared, and willing to defend?
Actually, we have prepared from yesterday. 40 years ago, we already prepared for 40 years to tell the world we will fight for our freedom and democracy in Taiwan. Today, here, and I also, this morning, I listened to Lord Alton from
Lord
UK.
David Alton. Yeah.
The last word, very inspiring. He said, the whole world, when they're looking at the Ukraine problem and then looking at the Taiwan problem, not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. I had to warn all of the leaders in the world, because today I already sent out that message. The Taiwan Strait accounts for 50% of the world's high technology GDP of the world, if cut off by mainland China. That would be a disaster for our economy. Would be a tsunami to the whole world. So I think, but most important things is Taiwanese. We have already thinking about, like Bobby today, I was asking him about how to operate American rifles, pistols. Right? He is an expert. And why I convey this information? Because I have a lot of friends in Taiwan. My friend Paul there. We always talking about this. Young men, from Taiwan. We're talking about we will fight with rifles when they invade. Anytime, just like Ukraine. Ukraine people they have already demonstrated how strong the civilian when they want to fight. You see that? Putin was so bad to see what happened in Ukraine. You know, Ukraine is so near to Russia. We are so far from China. So that's a lot of difference here. We already have our country to prepare a lot of weapons. Just now, we have our national security team here in DC talking to United States government. We will buy more weapons.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Pastor Huang, final word.
I think from 1996, the Presbyterian Church has changed for skill or technology to invite from Abilene to Taiwan. That is civil-based defense is a tool to prepare us to defend our enemies. So I think it's also used in the 2014, the sunflowers movement in Taiwan. In Taiwan Congress. So the students study the guide from the institutes, in instances, Gene Sharp, and from the guide to defense the police and the government. So I think we prepare this step by step, especially in Presbyterian Church. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's give another round of applause for our distinguished panelists. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. But tomorrow at 1:30 at the room River Birch B for boy, at 1:30. So ChinaAid, we're hosting an event particularly focusing on the Communist Party's surveillance technology and religious freedom. So we'll bring the first rescued survivors from Kyrgyzstan, a Christian community from Xinjiang, to share how in the concentration camp the Communist Party dispatched this surveillance technology in their suppression. And we have former Congressman Frank Wolf. We have my good friend, Dr. Scott Flipsy, who's the policy director and policy and communication director at the C Congressional Executive Commission on China. He's here, actually. Good advertisement. And so let's close with a benediction in Hebrew language. Again, Rabbi Bobby.